All right, so let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. My name's Dora. I'm a blogger and an events organizer for the Free Your Mind Mental Health Initiative. We're dedicated to raising awareness on mental health and mental health education through our online platform. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 7 territory land. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yahi Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all of the people who make their home on the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. In addition, I would just like to let all the participants know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be posting the audio on Spotify afterwards. So let's go around to all of our guests who will be speaking today, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves. Who would like to begin? I can pick someone at random if we want to.
I can start out if you want.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Hey guys, my name is Esmena Brer. I just graduated from Ernest Manning High School, and mental health is a really personally important issue to me because it's been something that I've been working on for the Calgary Board of Education, on the Chief Superintendent Student Advisory Council, and the Mayor's Youth Council too. And working on those two, advisory boards, I've kind of learned that it seems to be one of the biggest things that youth today are struggling with, especially when it comes to students, because of the amount of stress that we have to go through and just the amount of changes that are happening in the world every day. And so I'm really excited to talk to you guys about that today.
Great, thank you. Who would like to go next?
I don't mind going next. I'm Safa and I'm from Jack.org. I'm the Alberta Program Coordinator, and Jack.org is a Canada-wide mental health charity that works to empower youth to create change in their own communities. So we train youth speakers to speak to other youth about mental health. We fund mental health clubs, and we also run mental health conferences that we call summits. And we have lots of activity happening in Alberta, and the next upcoming thing that we have is actually something called an Alberta COVID Hub. We're working with the government and with Kids Help Phone to release a one-stop shop where everybody can find links to support their own mental health and also to navigate the mental health systems. We know that that's a big barrier to getting access to help, so you should see that in the next few weeks. And I'm very excited to be here to talk with all of you guys.
Great, thank you, Safa. Who can we go to next?
I can go next.
Thank you.
So my name is Azad. I'm currently a high school student at John D. Diefenbaker. I'm going to grade 12. I'm really passionate about productivity and how I can reach my maximum productivity. So when I was talking to Grace earlier about some of the questions that were lined up, I really thought that I could kind of share my experiences with productivity and how it affected my mental health.
Awesome, thank you.
I can go next. My name is Jed Chun. I am a therapist based out of Los Angeles, California. I am one of the directors of the Asian Mental Health Collective, whose goal is to destigmatize Asian mental health issues. And we do a lot of different projects. We work with a lot of Asian mental health professionals. We have a directory for the United States, and we're actually working on a directory for Canada as well. And we also run the Facebook group Subtle Asian Mental Health. So those are our biggest projects right now.
Awesome. Okay, who would like to go next? Carrey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Carrey. I am the founder of the Asian Mental Health Project, and our mission is to empower, educate, advocate Pan-Asian communities in seeking mental health care. And in doing so, we create multimedia educational resources as well as host community events. One longstanding one we have is every Wednesday, we will have this event called Stay and Check-In. And basically, it's a non-judgmental space for people to unpack what's on their minds, and also a space for mental health professionals to come in and facilitate on a topic of their choice. Topics in the past have included racial trauma, coping with anxiety, and stuff like that. I myself am not a mental health professional. I am just a very passionate advocate due to personal experiences. I actually work in public relations and comms, so that's what I do by day. And yeah, we have an upcoming event called the Survivor Support Summit, and that is to support survivors of sexual and domestic violence, and that will occur on August 22nd, and that also roots in our mission of providing multimedia resources to sort of educate on topics rooted in social justice and mental health. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Carrie. I think Jeanette is our last guest to introduce themselves.
Hello, as I mentioned before, I found this group on the Facebook subtitle Asian Mental Health. I actually was interested because I actually have some personal issues. Like there's some things from my past that have triggered me and has affected me negatively, as well as I would like support from others people online to see how if they feel the same way and what kind of memories or anything they have on their mind they want to share out, and let's see if others can offer them feedback. I actually think this is a good group because on Facebook it's limited amount of groups to see what matches your personality or what matches you, and sometimes like your everyday outside surroundings they don't really give too much support, and I think that like the Facebook the support group is very helpful to people online.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all of the guests that need to introduce themselves. So start the actual webinar. So today we'll be talking about mental health and productivity. If there's any questions that you have, feel free to turn on your mic or webcam and ask, or type it in the chat. But there will be a Q&A period at the end. So if you want to save your questions to the end, that's also fine. So many of us live very busy lives and still feel the effects of this even when we stay at home. And for some, getting all of our work and chores done is a great way to distract ourselves from the challenging way of life that we are adapting to. However, some people have a harder time with being productive, especially during stressful times. It is important to find a healthy balance between being productive and knowing when you need a break. So we'll start with the questions. They're pretty open-ended questions, so feel free to add whatever you want, just elaborate however you wish. So the first question is pretty broad. How are productivity, wellness, and mental health related? So anybody
Azad, I totally think you should speak on that.
Yeah, I can definitely start with this question. So, in my mind, productivity, wellness, and mental health are all kind of a give and take relationship. So, I'm kind of one of those people who wanted to be a workhorse my whole life. Like, I always wanted to go, 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 never stop, never take a break. And that really sort of started to affect my wellness. So, I started doing a lot of sports, a lot of extracurriculars, a lot of advocacy, like that kind of thing. And that started, I noticed, eventually I reached a limit. So I remember just when I was in grade 10, I was starting to join all these different groups, Mayor's Youth Council, that kind of thing. And I was at rugby practice and I fainted. So, and it wasn't from like working out or anything. I fainted because I wasn't getting enough sleep, not drinking enough water, all of these things that I was kind of neglecting just because I wanted to be more productive. You know, there's no time for sleep. I have to study for this. I have to do this. And that kind of started to hurt my body. And then eventually, as a result, it kind of hurt my mind as well. So it's a give and take relationship. I'm definitely not like that. I haven't fainted or anything since then. So that's good. But I was really glad that I learned about the relationship between different things like productivity, wellness, and mental health. So that's kind of my piece.
Excellent. Thank you. If anybody wants to add on to that, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mind adding on to that. Funny enough, my dad's name is Azad, and I used to play rugby for the past 10 years as well. So small world. I think a big thing about productivity that stands out to me is that in today's day and age, and like for young people in school and also working people, being productive usually refers to like executive brain function. So things like recalling and applying knowledge, complex decision making, focusing on multiple projects and multiple classes, and balancing priorities. And when you're stressed, your brain's capacity for all of these things decreases. So like Azad was saying, taking care of your mental health can actually like help you decrease that stress and improve your capacity to be productive in other ways. Something, a little snippet, a small rant to add into this is being like, we're in a society where measuring productivity is like, sorry, how do I say this? Productivity is measured in a really specific and a really narrow way. And often, especially in the working world, productivity is a function of how much money you can make for yourself or for someone else. And so we really have to like unlearn and expand that understanding. Productivity can be about being happy, or doing anything that helps future you. And with that in mind, we can see that rest and taking care of our own needs can also be productive.
Great, thank you, Safa. Okay, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing, Azad. I can really relate to what you were saying. So back in college, I was not taking care of myself at all. I was very much putting my, I guess, my perceived productivity over my own health. And I would faint on a yearly basis. So at once a year from from my sophomore year to my senior year, I would just collapse. And it was really scary, but a lot of it I realized was me attaching my value to my quote unquote productivity. And as Safa was saying, productivity isn't just how much work you can produce or how much money you can make. It's also, the rest that you intentionally make for yourself. It's also putting your wellness and mental health first. And for me, mental health is sort of the backing to everything. You will always experience quote unquote mental health, right? And the wellness portion is, to me, like how I take care of that. And then the productivity portion, I just try not to let overweigh the other two. It is possible to be productive, but also to rest. And that was a very hard lesson to learn with the many pavements that my head hit. So I'm fine, I promise.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Carrey. I think that's a pretty, at least as a therapist, it's a pretty common thing that I hear now from a lot of college students, that there's this pressure to perform and be productive, and as a result, they kind of push themselves to a place where it is unsustainable for them, and they end up, whether it's having health problems or whether it's passing out or fainting or having severe anxiety attacks. Those are also really common things nowadays, and I think that. One of the things I tell a lot of my clients is that productivity, the way that we see it, as Safa has said, is kind of limited in the way that we kind of think of it. And so a lot of times I kind of present this idea of like, hey, being productive, if you think about it, if you're going to use this kind of idea that we have already of what productivity is what you can like make and what you can create, wouldn't it make more sense to also take care of yourself so that you could create more? Because if you're going to think about it, if you don't take the time to take care of yourself and address your mental health needs, then you'll end up going to be net overall less productive, quote unquote, than you would have been if you had just taken the time to maybe focus on yourself for a little bit, so that you have the energy and the mental capacity, as Sav had said earlier, to address those more, I guess, what society thinks productivity is, right? And so, in a sense, it really is investing in a different kind of resource to help bolster the rest of your life. And it is, I think, that taking that time to rest and take care of yourself is productive because you're preparing for whatever else might come in the future. And so I think all of these things are inherently related, because you can't really do any of the other ones without the other.
It's interesting, Jed. I think I can speak to that a little bit too. So I work at a software startup company, and we work on some really interesting artificial intelligence problems. And it's really weird. So my team of software engineers, the classic software engineer type, right? They go all night, they go all day, and then they'll continue programming until they pass out about 5 days later, or they just don't have the brain power to go on anymore. And then that's when they take a break. And I've realized that there's just almost like two types of people on my team: the kind that will go all the way until they're done, and the kind that will, take breaks and set personal boundaries with work and life and try to get the rest that their body really needs. And I always find that the people who do take a break and who, limit themselves to a certain amount of hours of work every week tend to perform better on the job and come up with better ideas in the long run too, than the people who burn themselves out trying to fix something until it's absolutely perfect.
Great, thank you guys. If everybody is done adding to that question, I think we can move on to the next one. How is our current world situation impacting the productivity and wellness of people?
I can go first again, I guess. So, of course, everyone knows our global situation and how it affects everyone differently. So, one of the ways it affected me is that, like I said, I have that go, go, go mentality. And I mean, I still do. It's just now I've learned to take breaks here and there and take care of myself. But I still have that mentality that I always want to be doing something. I don't like sitting at home. That's not who I am. So I used to do a lot of volunteering, a lot of tutoring, that kind of thing. And as soon as kind of the world stopped in a day, all of these volunteer opportunities, I was in the middle of planning a bike-a-thon that was going to raise money for charity. Really exciting. So all these projects kind of just ended. And all of my productivity, all the work that I put into things just kind of stopped right there. But then also any future opportunities, like I wanted to volunteer at some senior centers and things like that. All these things kind of stopped. So I would say that my wellness was affected because I was kind of lost. So like for the first couple of weeks I had, what am I going to do? What's going on? Like I was really lost and I really didn't know what I could do. And so that was a time where I just kind of slept all day, all night because I had no clue what to do and I didn't want to be awake and not do anything. So I'd say that affected my wellness. I would say it was a really good break for me in the long run. I was able to recuperate and everything like that. But I would say that being lost was kind of a really hard time for me. So I'd say that's how it kind of affected me.
I can speak to this a little bit too. Something that I like to think about when I think of the factors that impact mental health is that the levels of stress in the environment around us is a really big predictor about our mental health. So if we have very stressful work lives, very stressful home lives, a stressful world that we live in right now, that's all going to impact our mental health. And we also know that humans are creatures of habit and we like when things are predictable. And so like Azad was saying, when you can't think of like what's happening in the future, it really throws us off. It creates a lot of uncertainty and feelings of anxiety. And when we're balancing that, that takes up some of our capacity for productivity and just doing everything else. So something to keep in mind is that like in COVID times, we are functioning at a lower capacity. So we're not going to be at that 100% that we were at like in last fall perhaps. So we have to sort of adjust and know that even if things are starting to return back to normal, there's still a lot of that uncertainty happening and a lot of that fear, be it around safety or health, and then also like social supports and those sort of precautions haven't all been lifted yet. So there are still a lot of factors of COVID that are impacting our mental health and capacity. So we need to sort of adjust accordingly and not be pushing ourselves to 110, 120%, thinking that that's what we should be functioning at.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Safa said. And on top of that, I think there is this I think with a lot of the people that I've spoken to, there's this impending feeling of anxiety all the time, right? Because every day is just like more bad news. Every day is just kind of more uncertainty, and every day is kind of just more and more stress for a lot of people. And especially now with unemployment rates in the US being really high, there's a lot of worry, and I think that there's this collective feeling that we're all experiencing of just having some kind of pressure, having some kind of like she said, uncertainty. It is something that really weighs on us, and whether we're aware of it or not, it does affect us in different ways. And for some of us, maybe like Azad, it is this feeling of like, yeah, I'm just gonna sleep all day because I can't even right now, and that's okay. I think that everybody's trying to handle the situation a little bit differently, and does allow us to have some opportunities to see things that we might not normally have had. I think that despite the current situation, there are kind of silver linings that we can find. I think one of the great things about what's been happening is that people have started to focus more on their mental health, and people are starting to realize that, hey, like this this hyper productivity is kind of unsustainable. And if we look at a lot of the reports that are coming out, a lot of people are being just as quote unquote productive as they were when they were working during the week as they are working from home. And I think that it's a great time for us to kind of transition with the technology that we have to be able to move into a place where we can find a little bit better balance between what we're doing and I guess our productivity and our wellness, you know? Um, and so I think if there's anything that I would want to like tell people right now is just like the expectations have changed and shifted, and I think it's okay right now to kind of give yourself a little bit of space to just kind of take a step back from everything, because the whole world is kind of collectively taking a step back. And I think it's kind of reassuring to know that we don't have the same kind of pressure to kind of, I guess, perform. And yeah, if you're struggling, we're struggling. So even us as mental health professionals, you know, we have things to adapt to, and we have things that we're trying to learn, and we're trying to navigate the whole situation as well. And so you're not alone in the whole freaking out over the pandemic thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really wanted to touch on something you're talking about, like the collective experience. So there's this term called, collective trauma, which I believe is like, an event or a series of events or something that's happening that affects a large group of people that, shatters their experience of safety or well-being. And that's something we're all going through. One, of course, with COVID-19, the pandemic, there's that collective trauma we all have there, but also, a lot of the events right now regarding, racism, Black Lives Matter, that is also a collective trauma that, we can experience in different ways. And for me, a lot of this times has been difficult because we're one sort of facing inward with ourselves. So that one allows the opportunity for us to focus on ourselves and really evaluate what matters. But on the other hand, it's also making us sort of not making us face the news and whatnot, but there's sort of a heightened eye on digital devices, which in turn increases the influx of information we intake every day. And so oftentimes that can be very triggering. So for me, this pandemic and everything going on has sort of heightened my anxiety in a lot of ways. I have PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And so a lot of the images online, though I find them very important to immerse myself in, can be very triggering. And so then I do realize, as Safa, as Azad, and as Jed were saying, then I tend to function at sort of a lower percentage or a lower percentile than I was last year. And then I get really upset because I'm not as productive. But then I also realized, there's a layer of like systemic issues there too, in terms of, having this hyper productive society that values, your money making capabilities and your hustle over your well-being. So I don't know, it's sort of important to be introspective for me into like figuring out what really matters and planning to intentionally help my own mental health in that way. So yeah, that's my piece.
All right. If everybody has wrapped up their thoughts on that, we'll go to the next question. So what are some ways that you can know when your mental health is getting in the way of your productivity?
I guess I could go first and kind of point out some things. I think everybody experiences things differently, and your mental health, if you're having issues with your mental health, it can come out in a variety of different ways. For some people, it's emotional, and for some people, it's somatic, meaning that it's kind of like a bodily experience. So from what Azad had shared earlier, it seems like he was having somewhat of a somatic response where it's just like, yeah, I feel tired, I feel sluggish, I don't feel motivated. For other people, it does come in the form of emotions, right? A lot of strong emotions, whether you realize like, hey, maybe I'm getting angry a little easier than I usually do, or hey, maybe like I get like the smallest things now make me kind of sad, or maybe now you find yourself kind of constantly thinking over and over again, having the same thoughts of like being worried or being anxious. Those are kind of some like markers, some other somatic markers like bodily markers, or you're not eating as much, or you have like a loss of appetite, or you're overeating and you just feel like you have to eat because there's nothing else to do. And then some other ones where you realize, hey, like I don't have the energy to work, or I just don't have the awakeness. Like you wake up and you're just like, oh man, I'm tired still. I think those are all really good indicators that, hey, something's up. And a lot of times it comes because our body's telling us, hey, either our body or our brain is telling us, hey, like something's not right here and we need to figure out what it is, because yeah, it's just not working for us. And so I think those are a few good places to kind of start off. Just like, hey, like something's not right. And I think your body and your brain are always trying to tell you in some subtle way, one way or another.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that those are all like important signs of mental health struggle. And often you can recognize those as red flags before you might be able to recognize that, hey, I might be struggling with my mental health. So it's so important to have a list of that in the back of your mind. Other things that you might want to look for is just things that have caused a big change or a big shift in what your norm is. So if you're usually motivated, if you're usually great at focusing, and all of a sudden now you're very distracted, you're procrastinating a lot, you're feeling really demotivated, those things can also be a sign of mental health struggle, because there's been a shift. And like we know that we have a limited capacity for everything that we do. And so when COVID, like I was mentioning before, takes part of that capacity, that can lead to distraction and procrastination and demotivation. And you shouldn't beat yourself up over it. You should just take that as a sign that you might need to spend more time thinking about your mental health and taking care of it.
One quick thing to add to that. We actually had a guest come on and do a seminar on a workshop on perfectionism, and oftentimes that causes sometimes there's not an awareness of that, and that perfectionism sometimes leads to avoidance, right? It's just like I can't fail if I don't try. And so that is kind of tied into that whole feeling of like, hey, like I need to be productive and I need to like get stuff done, right? I think at least for a lot of people of Asian heritage, like that is something that we struggle with a lot, because there's always this expectation either from your parents or your friends or whatever that you have to like perform, especially in like high school and college. There's this like, you have to get good grades, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do all these internships and stuff. And so like that avoidance that you feel is also, it can also be a marker of something taking a toll on your mental health that you're not super aware of. I think specifically during this time, right? If you're putting off looking for jobs because you think you won't find one, right? I think that might be something. Or if you're just like, oh, like what's the point of starting anything right now, because whatever the situation is, then you can kind of start to tell, hey, like this thought process is a little different than what I'm used to, and I'm not doing what I'm not responding the way that I usually would respond. So that's another kind of just wanted to kind of highlight that again, like that avoidance is definitely something that can be an indicator for mental health.
I think on the flip side of this question too, where we're talking about our mental health getting in the way of our productivity, we might also want to consider the converse effect of our productivity sometimes getting in the way of our mental health. And, I think all of us have probably made the mistake, and we've heard stories of some of the speakers that were talking about how much they would push themselves and how much of a detrimental impact that had on their mental health. And I think because of the crisis and the pandemic that we're facing today, a lot of people have kind of started to realize, not just in part due to the isolation that we're feeling, but also in part that we're alone with our thoughts all the time. That I guess the intensity at which we often work and the length of our work days and how much we tend to push ourselves all the time without giving ourselves a break has kind of created almost like a social mindset that if you're not working harder than everybody else, then you're not being productive enough. And that's had really, really, I guess, damaging impacts on, I think, a lot of us, not just in this call, but in the world in general, and young people especially, right? And yeah, in the South Asian and Asian communities too, like there's just so much pressure often due to cultural context, right? And other things and familial expectations that push young people to go even further as expectations become higher. I think, I look at some of the people in junior high and I compare the expectations that they have of themselves of some people who have just graduated. And then sometimes I just realize, wow, you guys are pushing yourselves even harder than, we did when we were in junior high. And I think COVID has kind of helped us realize that the path that we're on is not sustainable at all, and that we need to take a step back collectively and say, okay, we need to put on the brakes, and maybe instead of prioritizing productivity as the only measure of success, we should also figure out happiness and the ways in which we can take care of ourselves mentally and physically, and how that might fit into the picture.
Great, thank you. If that's all everybody like to add, we can move on to the next question. How are different types of wellness and happiness related to productivity? So when I say wellness, there's lots of different types of wellness, for example, like spiritual wellness and social wellness and intellectual wellness. So how can some of those different types of wellness relate to productivity?
So as human beings, we all have a variety of different needs. And these are, I think, the examples that you've given so far: spiritual, social, intellectual, physical. I think these are all needs that we have as human beings. And so as we kind of explore some of these things and how they're related to productivity, I think they're all kind of interconnected. If you're not feeling, so for some of us, we crave or we need to have more social interaction, right? Which is something that's really difficult during COVID, for to have that meaningful social interaction. And so it does, I guess I'll speak on this one, and then if other people want to speak on the others, then they can go ahead. So for this one specifically, right, one of the struggles right now for a lot of people is that they're losing a lot of their social supports, and or because of isolating, right, you can't engage with them in the same way that you would before. There's a lot of I guess you could call like the certain neurotransmitters in our heads that trigger certain things, like the feeling of happiness, right? Say like when you get a hug, right? You can't really do that right now. And so as a result, you have this kind of, you lose an aspect of this social connectedness that you feel. And that part of you will like undoubtedly hamper your mental health, and hamper your productivity as a result. It's like, hey, like I'm not feeling as 100% as I usually am. And so, I'm obviously not going to put out as much, I guess productivity is the word that we're using today, as I was before. And I think it is just, if we, they're kind of intrinsically related, right? How you're feeling about yourself, how you're feeling in connection with other people is directly correlated to how well you're going to do in terms of your work and stuff like that. Think about it this way. If you've ever had a really bad breakup and then the few days following it, or maybe like the few weeks following it, you suddenly feel significantly less motivated for everything else in your life, right? It just kind of takes away, it is like you feel a sense of kind of loss that impacts the rest of your life. And I think that that social connectedness piece is definitely something that plays a part into that. And so for a lot of us, when we can't interact with our friends, when we don't have our coworkers to talk to deal with work problems together, you know, because obviously I don't know what kind of demographic we're speaking to today, but as somebody who's been in work for a while, sometimes you just go to the lunchroom and you just vent about whatever happened at work. And that's a real thing. And not having the space to do that, especially when you're working online, it's just like, well, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. It's hard to get connected, and not having that connection and not having that support network really makes it difficult for us to get our work done. And so if you want to look at it that way, or like, oh, here's a better example for the high schoolers out here. It's like after a really hard test, everybody comes out of the room, and the only thing that everybody ever talks about during lunchtime is, dude, how do you think you did on that test? And what was the hardest question? And which one was unfair? And you know, that's our natural way of kind of processing a kind of mental toll that it took on us. And so that's probably one of the best examples of how not having that social connection makes it more difficult for us to be quote unquote productive.
I think sometimes we forget too that I guess we're like physical, biological beings, right? On the topic of, you know, the needs that impact our productivity, I think we like to separate the fact that we have a brain and we have a body, sometimes overlooking the fact that they're intrinsically related and part of the same system. And, you know, a lot of the work that most of us tend to do is related to our minds, right? How well we can perform, how well we do on that test, how well we study, or even, you know, some of the professions that we hold are probably intrinsically linked to our mental performance. But I think our physical well-being, over and above anything else, impacts that mental performance, right? Like you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to stay hydrated, or else your brain's ability to function properly is negatively impacted. And when that happens, and when we continue to push past some of the warning signs of that you know, we were talking about earlier, where our brains and bodies are kind of trying to tell us, hey, it might be time to take a break, it might be time to rest a little bit. I think that's when things start to almost go to a really dark place for a lot of people, where they start feeling hopeless and they get these feelings of perpetual anxiety going into the future. So I think it is really important on the matter of productivity and its relationship to our bodies to use this experience where we're constantly around ourselves and have a lot more time to tune in with how our bodies are doing, and just, you know, listen to what they're saying and just be like, hey, if this is too much, maybe we should start practicing some new habits. Like maybe we should take a 10-minute break every hour and a half of our work just to keep ourselves healthier. Maybe we should finally try sleeping those 7 to 9 hours a night that we finally, you know, have the chance to do. Because I think the biggest benefit of not necessarily having as much to do during the pandemic than we previously had is that we've got the time to start shaping those habits that'll last out of the pandemic once it's over. And, you know, I don't think we're ever going to get a better chance to start sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night than we do now.
Yeah.
I can. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm good. Go ahead.
Were you going to speak about physical? Because I was going to move over to spiritual. So you can go first if you want to speak on physical.
I was sort of going to do like a holistic approach, but no, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to speak a bit on spiritual wellness. And I think that a lot of people will equate this with faith-based or religious practices. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just that. I think taking time to connect with your faith-based or religious community is great. But more broadly, spiritual wellness has to do with being able to connect meaning to what you're doing, meaning and purpose to your decisions, and essentially finding harmony between your beliefs and your actions, or your values and the decisions you're making in life. And so when we're in a moment like COVID, I think we're trying so hard to do to keep up with the work that we were doing before. But like when the world and the society around us is sort of facing these big challenges and suffering, I think for most of us, our values are really more aligned with looking out away from us and being like, how can we help others? And so taking time to help a neighbor go grocery shopping if they're elderly and can't do it safely, or make a donation to a cause that you care about, those things can really boost your feelings of spiritual wellness and help you find meaning in a time where like a lot of your regular like attachment to like purpose right now is shifted. So yeah, definitely make time for that, for spiritual wellness as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Safa. I think I wanted to touch on these different pockets of wellness as a whole, what productivity means, and sort of a metaphor to tie that all together. So I sort of think of myself sometimes when it gets really hard, I think of myself like a phone battery. So when I wake up in the morning, hopefully if I remember to plug in my phone battery is charged, right? And throughout the day, sometimes the stuff that I do that's productive drains my battery, right? And so then the wellness comes in. Wellness to me is recharging a lot of the times, like engaging rest to better my physical wellness, or to do that yoga or breathing exercise, that recharges me in a way so I can go back to not 100, but I can boost my battery a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that takes energy throughout the day. And I think, going sort of to the biological aspect, we are vessels of energy, like biomass and whatnot. So, there's a need to recharge in these ways, and engaging in these different wellness practices, whether it be spiritually, physically, intellectually. Oh my God, there's so many, I don't even remember. But, the engaging in these wellness practices to intentionally recharge your battery is super important. Though sometimes, we'll operate on that 20%, and then Apple / the thing in my head goes ding, 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 you're at 20%, you need to rest and recharge. So that's sort of a way that I think about it, especially when I don't have energy to think about it in any other ways.
I love that. That's so good.
I actually had a similar metaphor, but I used car and fuel in my head. But one of the ways that I would kind of approach this question is everyone has their own needs. And I mean, we all know like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how you need your basic living needs, and then you move on, and eventually you reach mental and physical wellness. And I think that everyone has their own kind of version of this. I don't think that it's the same for everyone, because some people will prioritize, say, their education or their social standing. And one of the ways that I would, in my life, have kind of approached the concept of wellness and affecting my productivity is, like Safa said, that there's different kinds of productivity. And I think that it's really important to kind of recognize that, because different kinds of wellness can affect different kinds of productivity. So in my mind, productivity for me, one of the ways is, getting that good grade, getting that 100%. And so my intellectual wellness will really profit from that. And one of the things that I will stop doing to get that good grade is, I won't see friends as often. I'll stay at home and I'll study. And personally, that would decrease my social wellness. So one of the things that I've been trying to work on, especially during the pandemic, is trying to use certain areas of wellness to affect other areas of productivity. So in that being said, like having a strong intellectual wellness, let's say, okay, I've studied for my 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever I feel comfortable with, I'm ready enough to where I can go see friends, to then use that wellness to increase my social productivity. And I think that it's still that give and take relationship, but it's whatever an individual is comfortable with feeling on their different areas of wellness, meeting with their different areas of productivity.
Great, thank you. Move on to our last question now. So there's a couple parts to this question, so feel free to elaborate on whatever you wish. So what are some tips on how to balance being productive with knowing when to take a break? And for example, like how important is getting a good sleep and eating healthy in regards to this? And how can people combat the guilt they often feel after not being productive?
So one thing that I'm going to talk about with regards to getting good sleep and eating healthy is that those things, so there are biological issues that come up that can directly lead to or directly correlated with mental health or mental illnesses, right? So one example that I'm going to give is I guess we can go with like thyroid problems. So thyroid problems have a bunch of different causes. Some of them could be obesity. Some of them could be not enough sleep. Some of them could be poor diet, all those things. So eating and sleeping, right, primarily can affect your thyroid. And your thyroid has a direct connection with some of the neurotransmitters that you create. So neurotransmitters being the signals that your brain receives. And so what happens is a lot of times when we have health problems, they can be directly correlated to poor mental health, meaning that you will feel more anxious, you'll feel more depressed, you'll feel more frustrated, or I guess more easily angered. So basically, part of the important thing, I think, Asman had said something earlier about how like your physical health is really important, because it is. And there have been numerous studies that are like, you exercise more, you'll feel better. And that's because exercising releases endorphins, and that helps you feel better. And so there are a lot of different things that we do. And eating, when we eat certain foods that we enjoy, it also releases endorphins, and that makes us feel better. And so oftentimes, like sometimes it's as easy as going out and getting a snack. Getting something that you enjoy eating might help you to feel a little bit better, at least in the moment. I mean, there's a fine line between like sitting there and eating a whole tub of ice cream and just like enjoying a little bit of ice cream. So the key is kind of just having that moderation. But sometimes when you have that feeling, like I think a lot of us know, like when we're feeling a little bit of something that is there, like whether it's a little bit of anxiety, whether it's a little bit of sadness, whatever it is, it can, like, there are some short-term things that you can do to make yourself feel better. Part of what we as therapists tell you to do is like, one of those things is mindfulness, right? That's addressing your spiritual wellness in a sense. It's kind of grounding yourself, but that's also a very physical thing, because when you slow down your breathing, your body responds like, oh, everything's okay. So it signals to the rest of you, it's like, oh, everything's okay, we can calm down, you know? So that's one of those things. But also like maybe going out for a little bit of like a jog or a walk, or just eating some, like, I don't know, personally I like ice cream, so eating some ice cream could just be that small little thing that helps to get you over that whatever difficulty that you're experiencing that day. And I think a lot of times people think it's this nebulous idea that like handling our mental health is such like a big project, like we can't do it right away. But there are small things that you can do here and there that will just kick that spark and help you to make it through. And sometimes that's all we need. So like, if you have to, just do like one of those small little things. And I think my encouragement is that, like, yeah, it doesn't have to be this big, like, I don't have to go to therapy and I don't have to go get like medication from a psychiatrist. You know, sometimes all it takes is like going for a walk every day. Or I'm not going to say that this cures depression or anything like that, but sometimes just a little bit here and there can help with the day to day. And that, I think, in terms of productivity, it's just like it helps here and there. And when you feel like you need to take a break, just go ahead. Like, maybe somebody else can talk about the guilt that comes with taking breaks. But I'm going to tell you right now, like I said at the beginning, like sometimes you need to take those breaks to kind of either refuel your car, as Azad said, or like recharge your phone battery, as Carrey said. So, yeah.
I wanted to chime in with this amazing quote by Jim Carrey, who I don't really understand his views and practices, but I did read this quote and I have watched The Mask, so I feel like, so his quote is, I believe depression is legitimate, but I also believe that if you don't exercise, eat nutritious food, get sunlight, get enough sleep, consume positive materials, surround yourself with support, then you aren't giving yourself a fighting chance. And though, of course, that was, again, is not to invalidate any feelings, but I think the part of that really stands out to me is, like, as Jed was saying, intentionally doing little things that help bring you joy or energy or calm you down is very important. That can make all the difference. So I'll tie from my personal experiences. These past few months have been very difficult in some ways for me. So I was talking to my therapist, And she was like, you know, like with the anxiety you're experiencing, maybe you should give medication a try. So she, you know, she referred me to a psychiatrist. And not that I'm against medication. I'm not. I've taken it in the past, but I've stopped for a couple of years. But I was like, no, I think I actually need to start doing the things you're telling me to do, i.e. journal, take walks, breathe, stuff like that. So after I had that conversation, it sort of shocked my system a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, holy crap, I need to get my I need to get my stuff together. So that weekend, I like cleaned my room. I like incorporated different breathing exercises into my day. Like I made an effort in trying to actually do that. Like I knew these things I had to do, I just didn't do them. And then when I started doing them, I greatly reduced the amount of panic attacks I would have in a week. And things have been a lot better. So, you know, it was nice to see that upward trajectory for myself because of those little life changes. Not that that's a cure-all at all. You know, I still may consider, you know, taking medication in the future. I still have to be more proactive in putting in my mental health. And that also ties into the guilt. You know, I do feel a lot of guilt oftentimes these days because I'm like, I'm not doing enough for the world. Am I donating enough that I can? Like, I'm not being productive and saving up for X, Y, and Z. But I think something that sort of eases my guilt is, again, realizing that I am a human being, that in order to be productive, as people were saying, or in order to achieve X, Y, and Z goals, I have to put my rest first. And that is not anything to be guilty about. Like I should not feel guilty about that at all. And so literally repeating that to myself every day has been helpful to internalize that idea. So yeah.
I really agree with you, Carrie, in terms of lifestyle changes being so important. And I love that you mentioned that, like, you don't want to invalidate anybody because you know that can be challenging. And just to elaborate on that piece, I think a lot of people that are dealing with chronic stress or mental illnesses or like mental health struggle that's lasted for a long time, making those lifestyle changes can be like a huge barrier. It can be really hard to take those on. And also returning to my earlier comment about being a rugby player like Assad, I've had several concussions, and one of the things about concussions that like you do as a coach is you go through a return to learn protocol. So there's step-by-step pieces where they get you to do one small thing at a time to add that into your life until you can get back to your old normal. And like at each step, you like think about it and like you build self-awareness to be like, am I feeling some of those symptoms coming back, those concussion symptoms? And I think we need to start doing that with mental health as well, and with like high levels of stress in our lives, that as we start making those lifestyle changes, be like, how am I feeling about this? Can I manage this? Can I add this to my routine? And once it, like each step becomes normalized is the word, in your routine, you can start building on that a little bit more, but you can't, it's not like black and white that all of a sudden you're a super healthy person that can do all of the basics, and then that just brings your mental health about. And then the other piece I wanted to add, this is about the guilt question. I think a big part of that is finding meaning and being aware of your values. So if you ever find yourself picking school or work over your mental health, I think it helps to take a step back and be like, what will this decision or this like all-nighter do for me in a week, a month, a year, 5 years, and then use that to help make the decision to see, like, is it worth it? And if not, can I ask for help? Can I ask for an extension? Yeah, and like, I think that's really helpful to just weigh out your options and be aware of how all of the things you're doing, especially when you're pushing yourself beyond your capacity, like, are they going to be meaningful or are they going to be helpful to future you?
So one of the things that I remember hearing that Carrie said a little while back was that when she noticed that she had a decrease in productivity, it made her angry. And I think that this is the case for a lot of people, you know, noticing that you're not at that optimal stage that you were at before really makes you feel uncomfortable or angry with yourself. And I think lots of people have experienced that, you know, oh, I can't finish my schoolwork as quickly, I can't do my job as efficiently, like all these kind of things. And that could lead to a spiral of I can't do it well, why am I trying? And that can lead to like a mental health spiral. And it's really important to try and avoid that because it's a lot more work just accepting yourself rather than trying to get out of that spiral. And I think one of the ways that I tried to learn to try and combat this negative opinion of myself when thinking that I'm not as good as I was before is that I'd say, okay, I didn't get as good on this grade or this test. Let me do something that I am good at. So I would, I'd play the saxophone, or I would practice MMA, like all these things that I like was confident in myself in. And I would try and, train in those areas. And when I felt that, like, wow, I feel really confident in myself in this area, it would give me the confidence to go back to that schoolwork that I wasn't very proud of and build it up to the best and to my standards. So I think that using that guilt to try and improve upon yourself and accept it is more important than, you're really make sure you don't want to spiral in any case, because that training of yourself to embrace the guilt and use it to motivate yourself is something that takes a while to try and learn, but definitely is something that I have found to be way more effective than the other method.
Just wanted to make a quick addition to your point, Assad. At Jack.org, we define like self-esteem with 3 C's, and the first one is building a feelings of competence. So making time do things that you're good at, and I think that ties in directly with what you're saying. Like that can boost your self-esteem and help motivate you for those other challenges as well. So that's great. The other two, if anybody wants to know, are feelings of control and feelings of community.
All right, so we're just heading towards the end of the webinar here, so might make some time for a couple of questions from the audience if anybody has any. You are welcome to type them into the chat, or you can turn on your mic and ask. We'll give people a second to think of some, if they have any. Sorry, did you have a question, Jean, or?
Yes, I did, but it's just the group chat links, that's all.
Would you like to ask your question here?
Oh no, I just want to be able to be added onto the group chat if it's possible, since when I click on the group chat links, it's broken for some reason. I don't know.
I think you're referring to the group chat links for Cell Asian Mental Health, and those are not available anymore. But if you need assistance, I'm pretty sure one of the mods will respond to you in a timely fashion.
All right, so if there are no questions from the audience, we can wrap up the webinar. So overall, productivity is something that many people struggle with, as it can be easier to procrastinate and put things off until later. Especially during this pandemic, being productive can be difficult. It's important to be able to find the balance between being productive and giving yourself a break, especially since the world around us is changing so fast. Hopefully some of these tips that we're given will be useful for both staying healthy and also getting things done. So I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and speaking about this topic today. And if you want to revisit this webinar, there will be an audio recording on Spotify or on our website, which is freeyourmindinitiative.com. Please also let us know if you have any suggestions or questions on any topics of webinars that you would like to see. You can also contact us through our Instagram at Free Your Mind Initiative. So thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. Everybody take care and stay healthy. Thank you, guys.